New wave of protests engulfing the French capital. This time it's doctors and lab workers who've gone on strike in a bid really to pressure the government into increasing its funding of the healthcare sector. Hundreds of doctors protested in front of the health ministry, demanding a larger upfront fee for consultations. It's also the first time in 7 years that medical lab analysts have gone on strike too. They've taken aim at the state's plan to reduce funding for their departments to the tune of hundreds of thousands of euro. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK is set to give police more power to crack down on unauthorised protests.
Well, this afternoon I sat down with all the police chiefs to make it clear that they have my full support in acting decisively to clamp down on illegal protests. It is completely unacceptable that ordinary members of the public are having their lives disrupted by a selfish minority.
Well, just in case we forget, that comes as Western politicians have been keen to support anti-government protests elsewhere in the world. France's President Macron has branded protests in Iran a revolution. Canada's Prime Minister has said everyone in China should be allowed to protest and express themselves, and that Canadians were closely watching the demonstrations against Beijing's zero-COVID policy. The British PM, meanwhile, has also expressed support for Chinese protesters, but received online backlash over his backing of a domestic crackdown on the same type of rallies in the UK.
This is a mighty display of blatant hypocrisy. Keep going, sir.
2 days ago, he was defending the right of Chinese people to protest and warning the government against repression. Today he says British protesters should feel the full force of the law. Interesting.
Justin Trudeau and Rishi Sunak decide which protests are legal and illegal for Canada, UK, and the world.
This is pretty interesting too. One particular social media user responded to Mr. Sunak's statement with a map of the world showing how the West and its leaders have viewed police brutality against protesters. Now, you can make out there the countries marked in red. They represent good protests for Western elites. The ones in blue, basically in the Western part of the world, those should be suppressed. Well, my colleague Donald Quarter earlier spoke to an international law specialist who says the EU works to secure the bloc's collective interest, not nationally significant ones.
We're seeing now more and more the system contracting itself under its internal contradiction. And in so doing, it has to resort to more force because the money is lacking, the funds are drying, the IMF is hovering over the country's finances, and Emmanuel Macron, let's say it outright, is someone who has been placed essentially by supranational interest, and his job is to make sure that the country goes on a lean regime. We've seen at the European level mechanism put in place, such as Eurogender 4, which is a collective of 8 gendarmerie services of 8 EU countries. They can be deployed at any moment's notice to basically quelch any kind of public disturbances. And they are not from the country where the protests take place. So it's all designed to make sure that there's no sense of kinship between the police forces and the protesters.
And how does the Western media play into this sort of idea of Western governance that you were just explaining?
Well, they've been accompanying the concept for the last 30 years now, so they are part and parcel of the entire edifice. The NGO complex, we've seen it in the humanitarian war for new market, access to new market, new natural resources. We weaponize the human rights regime using those NGOs that are heavily financed either by Western security agencies and or by oligarchs, Western oligarchs, as it were. And basically, you just kind of privatize, a public policy. But you present it under this kind of pink agenda, should I say, this human rights agenda. And so that, the media can then take the concept and sell it to the public as, no, it's perfectly normal what we're doing. And sometimes you have to step up to the plate and enforce and ensure that our values, I quote, are promoted throughout the world.